How's it going, informatics professionals? We are now on part 2-1, which is lecture number 3 in our Flutter4CME series. I'm going to give you a very basic overview of some of the most common and high-yield widgets you will use as you are developing apps in Flutter. And let's just go ahead and start with the format, which is going to be the majority of part 2, where I explain something and then I show you the web page and then we actually make it for the app itself. So if there were only two apps or two widgets that you knew for within Flutter, it would be Material App and Scaffold. And Material App, I mentioned, was the absolute bare bones of what you needed. Scaffold is what allows you to import a side navigation, to have this top part, the app bar, to have the content itself, right-sided navigation if you want, bottom bar, and a floating action button. It is pretty high yield. So if you were looking at flutter.dev and you go to docs, go to the widgets catalog, and just go to the basics, because the majority of what we're going to talk about in this part will be in the basics themselves. And there's your scaffold. So I'm going to click on scaffold. And this will tell you how you can make each part for the app bar itself. So it takes app bar, which is the named parameter. It takes something of a widget class called app bar. And that tends to be over and over and over again. You will see that repeated. So let's just go ahead and make something. This was our bare bones app. I'm just going to hit play so that it can run. And it will be over here, not in terminal itself. And I might as well just go ahead and close terminal for the time being. And most of what we'll end up doing as we're switching from here to the next is we will be adjusting the code. We'll be hitting save. And as we get a little more advanced, we will also on this opposite side be looking at the app we are trying to recreate. So let's just go ahead and get this part running. And it should be the exact same of what we saw before. And it is, and that's great. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to wrap this with a new widget, which I'm going to call Scaffold. And this part, if you actually check the document itself, this is going to be the body. So let's just call it body, and let's hit save and see what happens. There it is. It's very, very, very small. So actually, let's wrap this one with a center widget. And I could click this, or I could just say wrap with new widget, call it center. And I'm going to hit save. And you'll see it's still very, very, very small, but you see where it says bare bones here. What I do as you are seeing this part show up is a trick that will save you a whole lot of time called quick fix. And I'm going to keep these keyboard references up and explain which thing I'm doing as I do it. Formatting the document is useful. Triggering a suggestion, which is control space on a Mac, is very, very useful. And we already went in depth on the show command palette. Just so that you see this for Windows, the shortcuts themselves are also pretty similar across Mac and PC. So building along those keyboard shortcuts and things to just make your job easier. I had those bracket colorizers so you can actually see which is which is which. But if you have trailing commas at the end and you either hit save or if you hit that format document, which is the shift option and F, shift option F, it will reformat anything with a trailing comma to be smaller. But if it doesn't actually have that trailing comma, it will put them all together. So if you want it to look like this, that's pretty useful. But if you want it to all be one line, just get rid of that extra comment, and that will make your job so much easier. And now that we are moving on within Scaffold, we have a couple other parts called app bar and bottom navigation bar. And I'm going to just show you app bar for now, just so that you can see that part at the very top. It is an app bar, and it takes something of class app bar. So if I just in here within, within Scaffold, type option, so command space, control space, it'll actually tell me what the possible named parameters can take. And the good rule of thumb is if it's titled something, it probably takes that same variable. So I'm just going to start typing in title, and usually it takes a text widget of, we'll just call this Flutter4CME, and let's hit save. And now you see at the very top, there it is. That's pretty helpful. So this was pretty nice and all, except for the fact that you could barely read that title. And that leads into our next part. We're going to be talking about text and text styles. So let's head back over, and I showed you how to get to this from the widget catalog. Now I'm going to show you, if you're in api.flutter.dev, if you want to just start searching for something, you can do this up here, and you'll actually see all the classes and all the properties it takes and constructors, and it's really, really, really useful. So text always, in quotes, takes the first thing that is that it's going to show, and then it can, after that first part, take some named parameters, and one of them is a style that accepts the widget called TextStyle. And so let's implement that here, because we can just barely read bare bones. So let's, within that text widget, put style, and that's going to take something of class TextStyle. And let's make the font size, it'll take a double, so let's call a double is a integer, is no decimal points. Double is something that will take additional parts. If I actually, the nice thing about Flutter, if I just put this as an integer, it will interpret that it needs to be a double anyways. So it'll actually convert this over, even though I didn't put the 0.0 at the very end. That's pretty handy. Let's go ahead and reformat things so you can see it. And that is style and, or text and text style. Okay, so now that we have just covered text and text styles, let's go into center positioned. There's actually an ED at the end of this, and align. And before I go into this, I did mention the difference of an integer and a double, and I want to show you how you can look up any of this information. If you go to dart.dev and you go to the language tour, on the right, if this is large enough, you can see the different types: numbers, strings, Boolean lists, etc. The numbers are int and double, and this is how you can figure out essentially all of the different variables that will Dart will accept. I mentioned this language tour. It is very, very useful. The other thing I will do while we're having these lectures is I'm going to just for ease of use, show you some of the docs here and then immediately click over. And all of this information right there, I really don't need it right now. So that leads into the next part. Windows Command B toggles the sidebar visibility. And it doesn't actually show, but Command J will toggle the one that is down here, this debug console or terminal. So if I hit Command B, that goes away. If I hit Command J, that goes away. And now it's a little bit cleaner, and we can hopefully get into the next section. Let's head back over to Docs, the widget catalog, and we were just in layout. So let's head back over to layout. And I think center is probably the most straightforward. It centers the child within itself. And so the fact that this part that said bare bones when we had it at the very top, so if I actually got rid of this part, let's go to this, and I'm going to get rid of that last comment and hit save. It should show it up at the very top up here. And so if I wrap this into a center widget and hit save again, now it's back over in the center. That's really useful. Align is a nicer way that you're able to get, and there are also YouTube videos. I mentioned Flutter's web channel has some really good YouTube videos on here. Align is very similar to that, and if I just took this and say switch it with align, And right now it's not defaulting to anything, but if I decide I want to set the alignment to something, so let's move it to the top right. It already has the child as the text, so I'm going to set that named variable and alignment dot do top right and hit save. It's going to move it up to the top right. If I wanted bottom left, if you start typing each of the first few letters in succession, it will automatically give you that info, by the way. There we go. Now we have figured out center, and we have figured out some of the things that we can do with align. I will lead into what positioned is, and actually, you know what, the easiest way to get to that is going to be from searching here. And to do this, I think, well, you actually will want to have a stack, which is where you have several things back to back. But if you have, multiple widgets that are in the exact same location, the ones that are on top of it, you can put within a position, on top or to the bottom right or things along those lines. It's very, very similar to Align, and this YouTube video is worth your time and explains it very well. So the last part in this Widget 101 series is the container. And just to make things a little bit easier for you, so on flutter.dev, when you go to layout, the widgets catalog and then layout, it tells you about all the different things you can do if you're working with just a single widget or single child, and the stuff that you're working if you're working with multiple childs. So if you have like a column of things or like a row of things, or I did lead into where the positioned is useful. It's similar to aligned, but it is when you have a stack, which is multiple things together. The nice thing about container is it is in large part that one convenience widget that works with, it has some aspect of many of the different things within a single child layout. So like align is in there, constrained box is in there, padding is in there, margins is in there, even transform. So it's kind of like that one widget to help with everything. But if you only need one part of it, so if you only need the align part of it, just use align. As I open this up and you look at the actual widget itself, you should make sure that you read this in depth. And I will show you a YouTube video that's also worth watching on this, because sometimes this widget will be very small. So it tries, if it has no children, it's going to be as big as it can, unless it doesn't have a bounded constraint, which means that it doesn't have anything placed upon it, in which case it'll try to be as small as possible. And if I was to put that into better terms, so if I change this align to container, nothing happens. It is still looks exactly the same. But if I was to change the color of this to, let's say, colors.green, you'll notice this whole container takes up the entire space. But if I comment out this align and I hit save, it's still going to be green, but no longer is it trying to take up all the available space. And that's really important. There's some other really good videos that will help, but the big summary is it tries to honor alignment first and then sizes itself to what's the child below it, and then honor whatever constraints it's got, then to expand, and then to be as small as possible. So if there's no child, no height, no width, and there are no unbounded constraints, right now, it is trying to be as small as possible. But if it has no child and no alignment, but it has a height or width or constraints, then it will be try to be as small as possible with that. So if I actually got rid of the child, and actually let's just make this so that it's one line as well, and then comment out that line of code, and then hit save. whoops, I had too many there. Now it's going to take up the entire space. So the behavior actually matters based on whether or not it has children and whether or not it actually has constraints. This is important if you're using just container as a class, but there's a lot of really cool things that you could do with containers. So for example, I can even set like a margin. And actually, if you want to see, you can change the insets of all different sides of there. So if I did edge insets dot all, and I made them, let's see, like 12 pixels. Now you have a little bit of a margin there. You can actually, if I wanted to just make this on the top only, and I could say top is at 12, and if I wanted to set like left to 36, you can do a lot of really cool stuff with container. And if it seems like it's way overbearing to just have the actual container itself, then what you're able to do is actually just use the named single child widget for the task that you have at hand.